Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to the OBR Postgame show. My name is Barry McBride. We just witnessed the Browns finishing with back-to-back division wins to finish 5-12 on the season. Is it enough to save Kevin Stefanski? Is it enough for Shedeur Sanders to be named, not be named, but be in the driver's seat as a 2026 starting quarterback? And Miles gets the record. We're going to talk about all of that tonight on the OBR postgame show. But first, let me introduce the brains of the program, Mr. Pete Smith. How you doing, Pete?
I'm good. I was pleasantly surprised with what we saw today because this is the type of game where in 2 or 3 years' time, I don't know how many people are going to be able to name a player that started on offense in this game.
Yeah. It is definitely a defensive win. But in the midst of that, as Wolf76 puts it, it seems like we may have a kicker at the very least. The Andre Schmidt redemption tour completed, and special teams didn't lose us this one, Pete.
Yeah, redemption for Schmidt, obviously. He's talked about this, the fact that the Browns lost their first game of the season. There were a number of factors, but one of them was the fact that he missed an extra point and a field goal in that game. And they win that game, if not for those things. And, any number of people wanted him gone at that point. The Browns stuck with him. Andre Schmidt has made a huge point to talk about the fact that he's has just an enormous amount of respect and admiration for this franchise for sticking with him. And he's paid it off handsomely. What entertained me about this game, though, was the fact that because of two incredibly strange, nonsensical to me taunting penalties, he got to basically practice the field goal that would win the game because he had to kick 2 48-yard extra points. And he made them easily. But he's been outstanding. He was outstanding this game. And even as you see that yellow word flash on the screen as the ball goes up on that final kick, it was no question. Right down the middle. He's been great. He's been great in weather. He's been great in the cold. He's been great in the wind. He's been outstanding. And until he screws up his next kick, he's the Browns kicker for this season. So, for going into next year. So, he's been one of the best parts of this. And if you can have a storybook ending for a 5-12 team, Andre Schmidt's about as close as it's going to get.
Yeah, exactly. Kicker is one position that we may not have to worry about for next year. Another is running back, where we have Quinshon Judkins, who hopefully will be healthy again in time for the season. We'll see how that turns out. But we also have Dylan Sampson, who played well today, and Rocket Sanders. So it seems like the running back room is full at this point, Pete.
Yeah, look, Quinshon Judkins is obviously going to be your bell cow, but, there's questions with until he's back in the field and doing stuff. We're going to see how he recovers from his surgery and everything. We'll see if they try to add more. But Dylan Sampson, when he gets the ball in space, he's great. He just gets yardage and he's getting more confident as a runner between the tackles. But just the way the Browns offensive line has been this year just makes a guy like him have a very difficult time because he thrives on space and the Browns just don't have much of it. But even then, the Browns stuck with it today running the ball. I thought he did a really nice job on a couple carries and was able to fight from some yards, got a couple key first downs where he's just fighting for yardage. And then, Raheem Sanders is exactly what you think Raheem Sanders would be. He will fight for short yardage, but he's a better pass catcher than you think he is. And just gives you that sort of short yardage element that they haven't had. So, I think you have to take Raheem Sanders into this offseason and see if he can't earn that spot and potentially be your third running back. But we'll see if the Browns want to bring somebody else in just to see if they can do better to sort of round out that room in case, Dylan Sampson isn't going to develop into sort of a true, is he going to be an Eric Metcalf type guy? We're always sitting there, always mad that he's going up the middle because it just doesn't go very far. Are we going to sit there and want something else there? So, there's questions to be answered on that, but they have a number of options where you're at least intrigued by what's going on there. It's not one of the positions where we're sitting there going, man, they need just a whole lot of help. There are guys
Right.
that get yardage in this offense in that room. And obviously the biggest one didn't even play today, which was sort of a theme that the Browns were able to win a game without Quinshon Judkins, without Harold Phantom, without Carson Schwarzenegger. I mean, they're three most impactful rookies this season. And, have been carrying this team for so much of it, and they were able to get the victory without it.
And the thing that impressed me, Pete, is that they went a good portion of the game without either Tyson Campbell or Denzel Ward. Ward was out most of the game.
Yes.
And they were facing T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and they somehow won the game.
Yeah, it defies logic. The Browns should have lost by about 30. If you went into this game saying that D'Angelo Ross and Sam Webb were covering Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, you would have immediately assumed, oh, the Browns got beat the Bengals put up 40. It defies logic. My thing for the NFL, every team that plays the Browns next year, assume that Myles Garrett is about to break a record every game. Because if you're going to play like this, when he's threatening a record, just do it all the time. Just never, ever, ever let him get a sack, because apparently these teams just stop functioning on offense in a way that makes sense. You have that matchup all day. And you were so scared of getting beat for a sack at times that everything was quick. And it's not to say it was bad. I mean, the Browns defense did some good stuff. I'm not going to take away all the credit they deserve. This isn't like last week where DK Metcalf's not playing and Darnell Washington breaks his arm and they don't have Calvin Austin III. They have all their guys, and the Browns combination of the Browns defense playing well and the Bengals offense seemingly unwilling to take advantage of what was there. The mental block that the Bengals have with the Browns defense is something I cannot figure out. And it now extends beyond this got to be the third coordinator at this point that the Bengals with Zach Taylor have just been unable to figure this thing out. And they even talked about it on the broadcast, because I think I don't remember who was doing the color commentary, the DB, was basically like, this scheme is extremely talent dependent. You are expecting to have these excellent man corners out there the entire time. And when you don't, you look like a complete husk of a defense. It should have been easy money all game. And for whatever reason, this has been a running theme. Zach Taylor cannot beat this defense. Whether it was Mike, it was Joe Woods crushed the Bengals. We just keep going with this. And Jim Schwartz just continues to crush this team. Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase Brown, who's an excellent running back. They have decent tight ends and everything else, and yet they cannot score points on this team. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's it's been a running trend now for quite a number of years. Even though their acquisition of Joe Burrow should have given them annual dominance over the Browns, but just amazing job by the Browns defense today. But we got to talk about the coach. We got to talk about the quarterback. Immediately after the game, the Browns media, of course, tried to ask Kevin Stefanski about his job security. And Stefanski answered, with all respect to that attempt, I'm not making this game about me. There's been no information about that. I've been keeping my eyes open here. I have yet to see anything that indicates there's been any major news after the end of the game. But at the same time, you've got people like Jay Glazer, as a movie fan points out here, saying that Stefanski's gone, and Glazer's usually pretty plugged in.
That is not what Jay Glazer said.
To then. What did Jay Glazer say? Jay
Glazer basically said that Kevin Stefanski expects that he could be gone at any time. That's to be clear, there have been guys that have made predictions. Everybody is hedging.
Right.
Adam Schefter hedged. Adam Schefter, they do their whole segment and they go, I believe he's going to be gone, but he hedged there. Jeremy Fowler, 50-50. Diane Rossini, well, more likely than not. Everybody's using guarded language on this to give themselves outs on this, because I think the reality is they don't really know. And what most people are doing is they're sitting there going 8 wins in 2 seasons. There's no way they can bring him back. It is largely the element rather than we know for sure, because if they did, we would know for sure. And we don't, which doesn't mean it won't happen. Certainly that could be what happens. Although my immediate question for that would be, then what the hell was the point of beating the Steelers and the Bengals? It sort of invalidates both victories. If the answer is, well, did these games because and the reason I say that is not just because they won and hurt their draft position, though that does matter through that vein. It's more along the lines of the reporting was both from the OBR, which has been saying this for weeks, and then when Jeremy Fowler came out and said undecided, that ever since undecided came out, the Browns proceeded to win 2 games. So, I mean, basically, if he was truly undecided at that point, then winning the games didn't matter, which would be a very peculiar way to operate. Since if there was something to be gleaned from that, and the immediate pushback from some people is going to be, well, look at the offense. Well, my immediate answer to that is, if I look at the offense that played today, I would project one starter definitely that started today will start next year, maybe 2 or 3 more. Maybe I should say maybe 2 more. Cedric Tillman, maybe. Shedeur Sanders, maybe. Joe Bitonio, definitely, if he were to decide to come back and play another year, though I doubt that happens if Stefanski's not here. So at that point, you were talking about not 8, 9 new starters relative to what we're seeing on the field. Obviously, some of those were just injured. Quinshon Judkins would be in that group. Harold Fannin would be in that group. David Njoku, if he's brought back, is going to be in that group. The Browns started with Jerry Jeudy, obviously, Cedric Tillman. Then it was Isaiah Bond, who is interesting, and I thought he was going to score a touchdown in that last play. Blake Whiteheart, Malachi Corley, Gage Larvadain were guys that were in the mix, and then the offensive line comprised of Cam Robinson, Joe Bitonio, Luke Whippler, who left on a cart. We got Tevin Jenkins, maybe he's back in some capacity, and KT Leviston, who will be back, though I don't think he's going to start next year. Like, who do we think is like, if you're trying to judge the offense and you're saying, well, tell me about the offense. Okay, I'm going to tell you most of it's not here. It's not on the team yet. So, I mean, if that's where I sort of get confused on the whole idea of, well, show me what you've got on offense. Kevin Stefanski showed you what he had on offense. Harold Fannin was outstanding this year. Quinshon Judkins, very talented, clearly a capable back if they get some blocking. But most of these guys were trying to fight for roles. And if you ask me based on this game, if Kevin Stefanski's retained, I love what I saw from Malachi Corley as an example. I continue to like what he offers, even if you're going to sit here and go, well, I can't build an offense around that. Right. Of course you can't. But as a wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, who just does some stuff, I love what he does. Same thing with guys like Sampson and those, and you need guys like that. But the main cogs of this offense are not on this team right now, which is whether it's Kevin Stefanski or Coach X, that's going to be true.
Yeah. And whoever takes over the offense next year will hopefully get the benefit of a personnel department that is laser focused on adding talent on the offense. Hey, before we go further into the coaching thing, I just want to let folks know that we are open to your comments and questions. I've got a couple of them starred for reference a little bit later on. But we'd love to hear your comments and questions because we want to talk about what you want to talk about and make sure that the show is of interest to you. So if you're watching on X, jump over to YouTube or Twitch and you can join the chat room and ask all kinds of questions. If you're already in on YouTube, please let us know what you're thinking about and what you want to talk about. All right. So when it comes to the coach, the only thing definitive that I've heard that sounds like legitimate information is really the notion that the notion that the Browns have looked around a little bit, right? That they have reached out and inquired to some coaches about their availability or whatever, which you might do if you think that you might move on from your coach. It's due diligence, or that your coach might quit or resign, for some reason. Maybe he's sick of being handed, quarterbacks that he doesn't believe in. You never know. But so far, that's all I've really seen, Pete, and a notion that, they're going to talk about it after the end of the season.
Which, by the way, even if they thought Kevin Stefanski, I think is good practice for them. They've got to there's a couple ways to look at this. You're a team and you're the Browns and you're sitting there trying to figure out, let's say you're not sure about Kevin Stefanski. You want to go out and see what's out there, because the feedback you might get on seeing what's out there may tell you a lot. You may find guys that you really like out there and be like, okay, this really interests me. You also may find out that the information you get back basically tells you, one, it's going to make you feel better about keeping Kevin Stefanski, which if that eliminates that uncertainty for you, great. Additionally, if you are trying to get a sense of how your organization is viewed, this is an easy practice to do that.
Right.
And you may not get the answer you like in that scenario, which unfortunately I think is a real potential element for the Browns. I don't know what kind of feedback they're going to get. And like in the same way we talked about the quarterback, the best thing Kevin Stefanski could do is win football games, because in this scenario, because it does hurt their draft position. So if you were to say, the Browns were picking second in the draft, for example, or first, like the Raiders now are, even if you are not a great franchise at that point, you can sell the idea of, well, I've got a great defense and I've got the number one overall pick in the draft. So you can come in here and get the guy you want and coach the team. When you're in seventh pick and you've got these other factors like Deshaun Watson's going to be here, and other elements in that vein of like the fact that you're going to have to overhaul the offense, the job may not look that appealing, and you'll get people going, well, there's only 32 jobs. You do not want to operate under that notion if you're hiring for this. You do not want to go, well, there are only 32 jobs. Somebody has to want my job. That is not how you're going to get the good candidate. You want to bet your job, your team in the best position to hire from a position of strength. You want to hire the best candidate. You don't want to hire a guy because there's only 32 jobs. And I hear this all too often. And one, it doesn't prove that true, as we've seen from like guys like Ben Johnson. We've already seen Robert Saleh sort of send this message of, yeah, man, I'm not in a real big hurry to jump out of this thing for any team. Basically sending out the message that, look, I probably only got one more shot at this. If I even get that, I'm not just going to run out to the first team that offers me a job. And he just worked for the Jets, so he may not be in a huge hurry to work for a team like the Browns. So either way, all that feedback gets back to you, and it hopefully allows you to give you a more educated answer, regardless of what you do. It could give you the confidence to say, okay, we can move on from Kevin Stefanski. We feel good about what's out there. Or it could give you the confidence, go, I wanted to know what was out there. I don't like it. It gives me confidence to stick with Kevin Stefanski. So it eliminates the potential of you go into the off season or you go in the early part of next year and you're sitting there going, I don't know, maybe I should have done this. You go through this process to hopefully feel better about whatever direction you ultimately end up going.
Yeah, it's useful information, even if you're not going to necessarily replace the guy in question. Gary Broadwater has made a couple of very interesting comments throughout the show. He says you should always be looking for and or grooming a replacement. What if Coach X or Player Y gets abducted by an alien? That's what professional organizations do. I can guarantee you that if any NFL team were to have a coach or player abducted by an alien, it would undoubtedly be the Cleveland Browns. It just seems inevitable at this point. So as we talk about Stefanski, one of the things I like to point out is that the Browns offense was much more effective when you started the second quarter or the second half. They changed the tempo. They adjusted things for Shadur Sanders. And I don't think that came from Shadur. I think that came from Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees. And to me, it was an indicator that, they aren't playing to use, aren't playing to lose, that the team really wanted to go out and win this game, and they made adjustments, and they were much more effective as a result. Why don't you think we saw that in the first half, Pete, And what do you think about the adjustment in general?
So there's a lot of benefits to going up tempo. Obviously, you can force the defense to keep the personnel group they have on the field. You also simultaneously have to be pretty comfortable with the offensive group you have on the field. Otherwise, you then allow the defense to sub. Not that that's the end of the world, but just something you have to consider. The risk is that if you if you screw up real fast. And if you're a team that is trying not to put a ton of wear and tear on your defense, which the first half, that's all it was. I mean, the defense was on the field for like almost all of it. That is sort of the thing you get worried about is in some instances, being able to take your time and try to get checks and do all these other things at the line of scrimmage may give you the ability to sort of find some things you like and put yourself in the right position to move the ball in a way that's going to allow you to stay on the field, which obviously was a thing for Kevin Stefanski when he came out in the second half talking to the reporter. The benefit of tempo, and particularly when you had sort of a chain of plays that they had together, which were all runs initially. It was run. And I think it was to 3 different guys. If you've got a nice plan of attack, it can get the defense off kilter. It can sort of just change up how they are prepared. And particularly if you do it when, the defense doesn't necessarily expect it or hasn't planned on practicing for it, it can really sort of speed things up because obviously the offense has a headset and a radio in the helmet, but so does the defense. And so many teams rely on that guy to make the call. And I've talked about this as far as if I thought the Pittsburgh Steelers should have used tempo more last week because Aaron Rodgers is really good at it. I think it would have screwed with the Browns because, trying to get the call from Jim Schwartz into Carson Schlesinger to then the defense potentially leaves you slow. Now, there are teams that if you're a defense, you could theoretically use hand signals and do some other things to try to get your communication in there. But ultimately, what you're going to usually end up in is you're going to force the defense to now play base. Whatever their base defense is, they're going to end up in a lot of it. Maybe they tweak a couple things, but for the most part, they're going to be in base. And that was a benefit to the Browns that it didn't allow Al Golden to dial up different pressures. It didn't allow him to load up the line of scrimmage. It just sort of forced them to play straight up. And the Browns were able to take advantage of that in a way that was really beneficial. So I'm always a big proponent of tempo. I don't think you use it all the time, but I think it's one of those things where every game, there should be a spot in your game plan where you're sort of at this point, depending on how the game's going, we're going to try to use tempo because we think it can give us an advantage. We think we can get them to stick in this defense. The other benefit that the Browns get by waiting the way they did and not deploying it to the second half is you got a sense of how the Bengals were playing you. So if the Bengals have sort of given you a very clear set of indicators of how they're going to play you, then the Browns can go, okay, we're going to go tempo, and this is what we're going to do based on what the Bengals are doing. And then that tempo then can hopefully take advantage and makes it difficult for them to now adjust on the fly. And that's where you get into the whole, the defense adjusts to what the offense is doing. The offense is now adjusting to what the defense is doing and that whole thing. So I really like the approach. I like the fact that they kept it on the ground. And I really like the fact that they got a couple really successful runs and then they took the shot. It's a shame Sal Cannella couldn't come up with the ball. It was maybe Shedor's best throw of the day. But it really, it was open. It was there. And if that's Harold Fandon, I think that's a touchdown. If that's David Njoku, I think it's a touchdown. But that's how it goes. But I like the approach in terms of what it gave the Browns. And the other thing you have to have with tempo is the confidence that your guys can get up and do that. If you're going to sit here and talk about this from Shedor's standpoint, Shedor has to be smart enough and fast enough to be able to execute it. He was. So credit to him. Yeah. He's able to get up there, get guys in the right position. And we talk about this, everybody likes to tell, the Browns are undisciplined, all this other crap. Who had all of the pre-snap penalties in this game? It was the Bengals. Bengals had a ton of them. The Browns did not. They were pretty well executed. They didn't make many mistakes. I think some of that's because the Bengals aren't very good and the Browns weren't necessarily scared of them. But Shedor got his guys up to the line of scrimmage. They were able to get in position, run the offense fast. These are the benefits you have. One, with continuity, which is, I can make that into an argument for keeping Kevin Stefanski, but it is also an argument talking about this is the progression you see from the guys they have. And even with a lot of no-name players relative to what most people are going to think of in this team in terms of guys like Travion Williams and all this other stuff, is you were able to execute it and execute well with this cast of characters you had out there, which I think speaks well to what they're trying to install.
Right. We have I want to continue on the subject of the coach. We're going to shift over here shortly to talk about the quarterback situation, because we got people sort of poking us from both sides of the argument in the comments. But one question from Gary that I'd like to address. He asked, does Rees calling plays help or hinder Stefanski retaining his job? And I think it's really difficult to answer, because that assumes some level of complexity or analysis of this in the mind of Jimmy Haslam, who probably is not considering, well, he didn't call plays, therefore we don't need him as a criteria for changing coaches. I thought Rees did a pretty good job. It seemed like the offense had more spark when he came in to lead the offense or call the plays. But giving up play calling in 2 straight years is not a good look, Pete.
I don't know. I think I don't know. I don't look at it as giving up play calling. In the case of Tommy Rees, I look at it as this was probably a natural transition. Mm-hmm. They thought really highly of Tommy Rees as a coordinator. He's called plays for both Notre Dame and Alabama. You can look at it as giving up play calling. I think there's an element to this where you were trying to get comfortable enough with a guy like Tommy Rees, who you think is talented, to basically be able to believe in him enough to say, you're ready to do this. Kevin Stefanski's still going to be in his headset, still going to be talking through plays. That's naturally going to happen. It theoretically allows Kevin Stefanski to do more things. People getting this whole management of the game. And ultimately, I don't care as long as they call good plays. But I do think Tommy Rees calling plays and doing a good job and sort of making Tommy Rees more valuable clearly helps Kevin Stefanski, because Kevin Stefanski hired him. And Kevin Stefanski is, I think, a huge benefit for Tommy Rees. There's this notion, well, if you just get rid of Kevin Stefanski and you either promote one of the other guys, you could do that. But I don't doubt, because Tommy Rees has said as much, that Tommy Rees thinks Kevin Stefanski is valuable to him in terms of, having done it, having been there, the experience he's had, just the situation he's had, having just somebody to bounce ideas off of is super valuable. So I think anything that's going to make the Browns better is ultimately going to benefit Kevin Stefanski. And everything we've heard is that people in that building like Tommy Rees. So if you take it to the next level, Myles Garrett really likes Jim Schwartz. He's not the only one, but Myles Garrett really likes Jim Schwartz. The defense is geared towards Jim Schwartz. So you've got a defensive coordinator that's really thought of in the building. You've got an offensive coordinator that's really thought of in the building. Well, what's the easiest way to keep them both? You just keep the head coach. This is the thing where Kevin, Jimmy Haslam has to decide the second he decides to move on from Kevin Stefanski, if that's what he decides to do, he has to accept the possibility that everybody's leaving. Is he ready to do that? Now, you can promote Jim Schwartz. My personal opinion is I think it's a net loss overall. I think they're better off with Kevin Stefanski because it allows Jim Schwartz to just be head coach of the defense. I like who they have as assistant coaches for the most part. There are guys I would clearly replace. But overall, I think the coaching staff is really strong. And I think that's the feeling within the building, which is why you certainly getting the picks right with the rookies is critical. They clearly have done that, but they are not self-taught. And Shedeur Sanders is probably the best example of that. He's completely transformed a lot of his game. And I don't know how many people actually listen to his press conferences. He talks like a guy who's getting revelations he's never gotten before. He talks like a guy who is learning stuff that he's never even considered before. My impression that he's learned a hell of a lot about playing quarterback this year. And he said as much in terms of, going to the offseason, what's all this going to mean. So that is all a credit to the people you have in the building, which is Bill Musgrave and Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski, who spent a ton of time with him. So I think anything that sort of bolsters your coaching staff ultimately is going to make Kevin Stefanski look more valuable, because the easiest way to keep all of them, short of somebody getting promoted out, which Tommy Rees's sort of situation was college coaching jobs, which are all filled, is to keep keep this thing as it is. Maybe there's a world where you get to a point where, that changes, and there's a world where you could promote a guy like Tommy Rees. I don't think he's there yet, but the easiest way to do this is to keep him. If you pull the trigger, you have to be prepared that everybody's going to be gone. And there's a world where Kevin Stefanski takes Tommy Rees somewhere else. Like, that's the other part of this whole thing, is that if Kevin, just reportedly, and who knows how true this stuff is, Kevin Stefanski's been linked to the Green Bay Packers by Mike Florio. He's been linked to the Titans and the Giants. So if the Packers hire him, I will be furious, because the Browns are not a better organization than the Packers. 2, he could go to one of those places and Tommy Rees could be an offensive coordinator. And then we're sitting there going, oh my God, what did we do? Like, this is the reality of the situation they have to sort of deal with, which is, how bad does Kevin Stefanski really piss off Jimmy Haslam is, to be determined. I find the case pretty weak against him, but it is what it is. Jimmy's the one who can ultimately do what he wants.
Right. That's why I highlighted the question from Ofuro, because I see so many places, the notion of getting rid of Stefanski, but the assumption that Jim Schwartz will stay there. And it makes no sense at all. Schwartz might be ticked off if he doesn't get the head coaching job. You don't know. Or he might just want to be a free agent because he doesn't want to start over and have to win somebody else over to his point of view on how a defense should be run. Or they hire a defensive coach, who will meddle with what Schwartz is doing. There's all kinds of reasons for these guys to leave if Stefanski departs. And I think you made that point very well, Pete.
Not the least of which could be the new guy doesn't want any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. He wants his own guys. Now, the next question beyond that, as Chantel puts it here, is, do you all think that they will promote Tommy Rees as head coach? Well, they really like him inside the building and have a very high regard for him. But at this point, we can only answer the question of, do we think they should, right? Not what's going on inside Jimmy Haslam's head at this point. I haven't heard any rumors that Rees is about to be promoted to head coach. And in terms of the question of should, I would say Stefanski and Rees are just getting started as a team working together after this first season, in that you're probably missing out if you dump one of them and tell Rees that, that he's ready at this point.
Yeah, like the big thing with Tommy Rees is you could make that move and be like, we're trying to get the guy. We want the next John McVay, and we think Tommy Rees is going to be that guy. Maybe there's a world where that happens. I'm not going to sit here and say he can't be, but it would be very difficult for me to see the Browns finesse that and keep Jim Schwartz, based on everything we've just said. The fact that Jim Schwartz, who's been at this forever, has been a head coach, has been at this for decades, would then be passed over by what, he may think the world of Tommy Rees, but he also may be sitting there and go, this punk kid is getting a head coaching job over me.
Right.
Those are the dynamics that I think are really difficult to play out. And I think most people who think, oh, we should, if you're trying to talk yourself into Tommy Rees, you're probably doing it thinking, well, they've got this great defensive coordinator in here. All he's really got to do is worry about the offense. And that's where things get really complicated, because if that doesn't happen, and now he's got to go out and hire staff and all these other things. And, so the concern over getting an upgrade is real, because the thing is, everybody's going to say, well, all they've got to do is get somebody who's better than Kevin Stefanski. Anybody can win more than 8 games in 2 years. And the history says that is not how we're going to compare Kevin Stefanski. We have people who are still talking about former offensive coordinators as if they are God's gift, and they are currently special assistants with the Los Angeles Rams. A former GM who is a buffoon of the job, and people are like, if only the Browns had not gotten rid of him. There are people who are still going to talk themselves into Bill Belichick, even as he is a human shit show at this point in terms of the drama of his life. If and when the Browns fire Kevin Stefanski, he will be compared as the guy who has 2 11-win seasons for the Browns, which is him and Paul Brown. You'll be the guy who's a 2-time coach of the year. You'll be the only coach under Jimmy Haslam that has a playoff win, and the only playoff win since the Browns have been back since '99. That is how he will be remembered. And that is ultimately a very difficult hill to climb for the next guy. So if the next guy goes out and wins 7 games next year, yeah, you may be okay with that for a year. But if they aren't in the playoffs the year after that, you're going to already be pissed and sit there and immediately be comparing him to, well, we had this guy who was really good at this and we got rid of him, because that's how it always goes.
Right. We are about halfway, a little bit more than halfway through this program. And we're going to talk about the coach a little bit more. We're going to talk about the quarterback, and then anything else you guys want to discuss as indicated to us via the chat room. But I want to point your attention to the duck in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. That duck sits in the middle of a QR code, which if you use your phone to click on it, will take you to the subscription page of the OBR. I will tell you flat out, YouTube doesn't pay us hardly anything for doing these shows. We survive and these shows exist because people subscribe to the OBR so they can talk to people like Pete, Elaine Adkins, and Jack Duffin, and Fred Greetham, around the clock, via our premium forums. And so we would really appreciate it if you would just give it a try, see if you like it. And then if you renew, you get Paramount Plus thrown in for free, which is basically pays for the cost of a subscription anyway. All right, there's my sales spiel. Let's go on to Dan McKinnon's question. Did this officially save Kevin's job? Reports were this game was crucial. The only thing that I've seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, is Lane's comment that this game was meaningful. I have not seen it anywhere else that this game would have any effect on Kevin Stefanski's longevity.
Yeah, that was the reporting that we got, that Lane had been told that the Browns, the people in the building don't know, outside of the inner circle for Jimmy Haslam did not know, but that this game was meaningful and could have an impact. Was winning the outcome that needed to happen? Was the offense doing X what needed to happen? Impossible to know, just that the game mattered.
Yeah.
Winning certainly matters. The way they won, I imagine, certainly has to matter. The guys in the locker room doing what they're doing, I imagine has to matter. But, who knows? I mean, Jimmy Haslam could have watched the first half and been like, the hell with this. I don't, this is the problem is, the Browns aren't the Packers. They aren't run by an operation. They are ultimately run by one guy who can decide to do anything at any given time, and just on a whim decide, I'm good with this. So, it mattered. Just how much, we don't know.
Right. I would agree with that as well. Let's see here. Wolf 76 makes a remark. It's another losing season, and getting to the postseason beyond is a goal, not just wishful thinking and minimal results. Certainly understand your point of view, Wolf, that, the bottom line is that the team won 3 games last year and 5 games this year. As Jimmy Haslam said, that's not going to cut it. 3 wins a year. I think you're left just going, well, is the disaster of the Watson trade and all those lost draft picks, does that result in this team simply being undermanned for any coach? Regardless of what you think of him, or, does Kevin Stefanski bear the responsibility? And we have another comment from, I didn't mark it, unfortunately. But it was another comment that basically said that there's a lot of disappointment in Kevin's training camps, and that the team does not come out strong during the year. Do you have any thoughts on that, Pete?
Yeah, I thought the training camp they employed this year was outstanding, and it needed to be changed. Last year's was not good. Last year's was not good in part because of a product of the injuries they were dealing with, and it got to a point where the Browns were consistently walking on eggshells because they just didn't have the people, and they couldn't afford to lose anybody. So they ran a soft camp out of necessity, and were not prepared for last year. This year, they ran a good camp, and they were better for it. And the results are the rookie class. You came out, and those guys were good. Quinshon Judkins, Harold Fannin, Carson Wentz were good from day one. In game 1, ready to go. Dylan Sampson, game 1, ready to go. They got a lot of good players, and unfortunately, they lose the game because, again, miscues, a couple drop balls that ended up being intercepted, and then the missed kicks. But the fact is, the Browns were ready to go. Their defense did what we expected them to do against the Cincinnati Bengals. They had an opportunity to win the game, even without Judkins in that game, because he was still not quite back yet. But nevertheless, the Browns make a kick and they're 1-0, and everybody's talking about, oh man, here they're off to a great start. And had that happened, the Browns would have been 2-1 with the Packers victory. So like, this team was ready. They just don't have as many. They don't have the guys, and it's ultimately a talent problem. And this gets back to, in my mind, when it comes to the NFL, it's a lot like the NBA. You're either a playoff team or you're not. Anything else doesn't really mean all that much to me. And the Browns, from the word go, we're not a playoff team this year. They just did not have the talent. The offensive line, quarterback, just not enough things on offense. Could they get close? If they had, with the 5 wins they actually had, and if a couple go their way, maybe, but they were still not a playoff team. And that's where I fundamentally have a disagreement potentially with ownership. If they're like, well, I needed to see more than what? You're not a playoff team. And that's ultimately where you're sort of stuck.
And what I would ask viewers of the program to do is to watch the playoffs and just note to yourselves the gap in the quarterback play between most of those playoff teams and what you're getting on the Cleveland Browns, with maybe the exception of the NFC South, whoever comes out of that mess. But by and large, the quarterback play is significantly different on teams that you get in the playoffs than you've seen from the Cleveland Browns.
Well, the Kansas City Chiefs have become the Cleveland Browns since Patrick Mahomes went down. I mean, that's reality. Like, they are terrible. And they've obviously shut guys down and are doing basically ethical tanking, as it's called, because they're just shutting guys down to protect them. They don't really want to win either. They're trying to get more draft position, but without Patrick Mahomes, they are garbage. That's all too often. Justin Herbert has been outstanding. You can make a case he's the MVP based on dragging the Chargers offense along with a pretty good defense to the playoffs. Browns don't have that. And that's obviously going to be a big determining factor on this thing. They could have a whole lot of talent on defense, and they do. They need way more talent on offense. But yes, the quarterback position is a critical piece, which, does nice segue into Shedeur Sanders, who had a wild ride of a game. Being honest, first half was not good. He struggled. Obviously, there's one big detail that I think defenses are picking up on. Shedeur Sanders really loves when he sees space that open up. He really loves to take off. So what you saw, and this happened on the sack fumble, is defensive ends now are playing Sanders as if they think he's going to step up and take off. So they are not going to go around as often and try to get around the tackles at this point. A lot of them are going to try to play about even, this is a coaching point for these type of quarterbacks anyway. You get about even with where the quarterback is, and then you basically spin back inside. Well, that happened on the play where Shedeur saw space open up and immediately tried to step up in it. He does not hold the ball well when he's moving within the pocket. His ball security in that is not good. The two guys converge on him. He has the ball kind of in his left hand at that point, and the ball easily comes out, and they ultimately fumble it and recover, and that sets them up for a short porch and a touchdown. I don't think he threw at least 2 balls into traffic that could have been intercepted in the first half. It just, some of this was the fact that the Browns could not get any momentum going other than the pass to Corley, which was a really good ball and set them up for a big gain and got them out of the deep end of their end zone after a questionable decision by Gage Larvey, and by questionable I mean terrible, on the punt return. But they could not get any rhythm going, and I think Shedeur fell into some bad habits in the first half in terms of maneuvering the pocket, in terms of where his eyes were going and not getting the ball out. And I think he made his situation worse oftentimes. Now, I give him a lot of credit because I think the second half he adjusted, he got better, and the Browns were able to keep the Bengals off the field, which is always a great strategy, keep their offense on the sideline. They were able to control the clock. They were able to run the ball better. Shedeur made a couple of really nice throws. Missed a couple throws that I'm sure he'd really like back. Like I thought when the play was called and the ball was in the air, I thought that Isaiah Bond was going to catch that ball for a touchdown. The shame.
Yeah.
He left it too far inside, and Bond couldn't close the gap. It was just too far. He had a great throw to Judy on that final drive. I mean, there were a couple of really good throws in there. He's just such a wild ride right now that all the credit in the world for the game-winning drive. He set them up. He made the plays he made to make. Set Schmidt up in a good spot. They win the game. But if we're talking about Shedeur Sanders in the offseason, my stance hasn't really changed on this. I'm genuinely curious to see what he can do with an offseason. For whatever reason, I really like the way that he talks in press conferences and the learning process and everything else, because I do think that the world has sort of opened up to him in a way that never has as far as being a quarterback. But I can't sit here and go, Shedeur Sanders is automatically going to be the starter next year based on what I've seen at this point. You have to get something else to at least compete with him if you're not just outright looking for another answer. And that does not mean I'm giving up on Shedeur Sanders. That doesn't mean I want to trade Shedeur Sanders. It doesn't mean I want to cut Shedeur Sanders. It just means I cannot sit here in good faith and say the Browns are ready to go if they just get Shedeur Sanders more help. And he's just going to take off. I hope he's going to develop and make big strides and get a much better, because I think he has developed in certain areas and there are things he's doing really well. But there are also too many plays where you're just like, that can't happen. Even on the last drive of the game, he took just a god-awful sack. He can't take. So, he's a fifth-round pick, and I think people have to come to grips with that. He's a very intriguing rookie, and I'm genuinely curious to see if one of the reasons I think keeping Stefanski makes sense is he gets to continue to work with this kid. And if the Browns fire him, all bets are off with Shedeur Sanders. I do not know what's going to happen with him, but nobody's going to sit here and go, I'm not going to say coach won't sit here and like Shedeur Sanders, but they're not going to take the job going, Shedeur Sanders is my starting quarterback and I'm good with that and nothing else is going to change unless they are more than willing to basically lose next season, which I don't think is realistic, or two, they are his father. So I think there's talent. I think it's worth developing, but you cannot, after we've seen him start 7 games, play in 8, and then come out and go, yep, that's our starter. I just don't think that is a good faith argument at this point.
Yeah. I highlighted 2 comments that we got earlier in the show about quarter after. He came in just about the same time. One of them is from Erwin Ford. He says, imagine if Sanders will have started day 1 when everybody was healthy. What would the win total be? That's why Stefanski is getting fired. And, Sanders provokes these sort of, not provokes, but elicits somehow very strong reactions from people. They either think he's the answer or he's definitely not the answer. And I think, Pete, you and I are somewhere in the middle there. My personal take on it is that we've not seen Shedeur Sanders' ceiling, but I don't think that ceiling is going to be Justin Herbert or Drake May. I think it's going to be somewhere in the Baker Mayfield zone if everything works out well for him. And that's not to say he's not going to have a fantastic career, as a backup or a spot starter or whatever. He can have a great career, make a ton of money, and, his fans will follow him wherever he goes. But I don't think that starting Shedeur Sanders at the beginning of the season, when all he had was his Colorado and Jackson State experience behind him, would have been the right answer at all.
If he started game 1, he wouldn't be starting now. He would have played himself to the bench. I mean, he just was not ready based off that last preseason game. And the first half of this game, there were shades of that last preseason game. Just really bad football in the first half of the game. Now, I'm glad he rallied. I'm glad he was able to come back. He talked about in the post game, sort of having to sort of find that, mental fortitude to sort of get through it and get over it, because his final stat line for this game is 11 of 22 for 111 yards and 6 sacks. They won. I'm not going to take anything away from him. He led the game-winning drive. But realistically, how different was this from DTR leading the Browns to beating the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2023? Very similar. And they did it largely the same way. And I like DTR. Like, I wasn't anti-DTR, but I had basically the same approach, which was he's not a real starter. He's just an interesting quarterback that you develop and hope he can become something. Unfortunately, DTR got hurt. and is now in Philadelphia or wherever the hell he is at this point. Shedeur Sanders, I hope he develops. But if he had gone before Dillon Gabriel, then we're probably watching Dillon Gabriel finish out the season. I think the ordering of the quarterbacks and when these two rookies played had a big influence. And, I think that's an important part to consider in this conversation, that if Shedeur Sanders went in against Minnesota, then Dillon Gabriel's probably finishing out the season as opposed to this. It just – even in victory, I think you have to sit here and question what he was able to do. Even if you give him his flowers, I think deservedly. The last drive was great. There were a couple of great throws, and if he threw that touchdown, man, everybody would be losing it over him hitting Isaiah Bond. Unfortunately, he didn't, and unfortunately, that has been too often the case with him this year. There have been plays where he just hasn't made those plays.
Yeah, very true. Another comment that we got is quite the opposite from Mark. He says Sanders played like garbage almost the entire game and managed to do something in that last drive. A 65-ish QB rating. You're asking if he should be starter next year, LOL. My introduction on this show did say, did Sanders win the starting job? And I think the answer that you'll get from both Pete and myself for 2026 is that it would be foolish for the team to anoint him the 2026 starter at this juncture. Do you agree with that, Pete? Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. As I've said all along, whether it was this show or any of the other ones I've been on, the best thing Shedeur Sanders could do to help himself and insert himself into the conversation, win football games. He won 2 football games to close out the year, and now the Browns are likely to pick 7th in the draft. That changes the thought process, because if the Browns were picking 1st or 2nd, maybe this is a foregone conclusion. It doesn't matter. Shedeur Sanders at least gives himself a puncher's chance, but you just can't sit here and go, he's the answer. He's an interesting player. You develop him. Any number of teams do this with guys. Obviously Tanner McKee with Philadelphia is sort of an interesting comparison from that standpoint. Philadelphia Eagles fans love him. But he's the backup behind Jalen Hurts. Should he be? Well, that seems to be an ongoing question with the Philadelphia Eagles fans. Nevertheless, there's a world where Shedeur Sanders could have that type of growth, and he can ultimately become a long-term starter. I just don't think he's there yet, and I don't think you can bet on that. I'm hoping. I would love nothing more than him come back into training camp next year and just be a great quarterback. But if you're asking me to be sane and tell you that that's going to happen, I cannot do that in good faith. So hopefully he develops. I hope he has a great offseason. I love the way he's leaving the season in terms of attitude. I think that stuff's really important to him. So I'm curious to see what he can do. I'm curious to see what Dillon Gabriel can do. They've got these guys that, may not be anything, but they've got a shot to improve and try to help themselves. But if I'm the Browns, I'm certainly looking at quarterbacks out there. I'm trying to see if I can improve the situation, because until they do that, until they fix that problem, they're going to be a mediocre to poor team.
Yeah, exactly. And Jim V44 points that out. Kevin Schwartz, Agosa Lombardi, nothing matters unless there's a major talent upgrade on offense, including quarterback, in his opinion. So, maybe Shedeur Sanders is that answer at quarterback. Maybe he's not. But the point is, I don't think any of us know at this point. Jay has some opinions about the NFL draft. He says, I want the right tackle from Miami, and if not him, I'd take Fano from Utah. 2 of our first 3 picks need to be better offensive linemen, no matter if it's guard or tackle. And that seems to be a pretty common thought process, Pete. But I guess the question is, with the Browns drafting 6th or 7th this year, the odds that a Dante Moore, for example, falls into their lap seems relatively low unless you trade up. If you're Andrew Berry and you're convinced that Dante Moore is a much better answer than Shedeur Sanders at this point, is that something you evaluate?
Well, I mean, you have to evaluate it. You have to at least consider the option. You can't just go into the offseason and go, well, we need to address the offensive line and all these other things. So we're not even going to look at Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore. You have to at least evaluate it. Now, ultimately, I think the evaluation still comes down to the fact that the cost is going to be prohibitive. Now, things could get really interesting if Tennessee finishes with that 2nd pick because they're going to be in a position to deal. They're going to be a power player at that point, but they're still going to be in a position to fleece somebody if somebody really wants to come up against Dante Moore, assuming Dante Moore declares, which is still to be determined. But failing that, yeah, look, I mean, they need offense. Offense just in general. They need more. They need a receiver. They need a premium receiver to add to this offense. They need offensive line help. They need, a quarterback. They need to get lots of things that are going to make this group better. They've got, if they retain David Njoku, they've got tight ends. I'd still like to get another tight end, but they have tight ends. They have running backs. They have at least one receiver. They need more of all of these other things if they're going to be good. And again, just to get back to the coaching point, doesn't matter who's coaching the team. That's going to be the reality. They're going to need all of those things, which may or may not be a big factor. And I'll be curious to know, because I have to imagine that Jimmy Haslam is sitting there going, well, Andrew, talking to Andrew Bray, well, what's this going to look like in a year? And when he tells him none of these guys are going to be here, or we're going to have to get all new guys, that may reframe his thought process in terms of what this group's capable of. Is that compelling enough to change his mind? Who knows? But yes, they need all kinds of offense. They have picks. They have free agency. They have more cash than people think they do. And they have the ability to sort of sell opportunity. They still have some weird things hanging around, like Deshaun Watson is still going to be here in some form or fashion. And that's another sort of weird wrinkle that's going to be involved. But nevertheless, they just need talent on that side of the ball, all kinds of it.
Absolutely. I tell you what, we've got a couple of other questions here. This one from Jeffrey Champion. So would you guys be interested in Marcus Mariota for a bridge quarterback?
No.
I have a strong opinion on this. I think I just heard yours, Pete.
No, I mean, look, he's a backup quarterback and he does fine in that. But the problem is he tends to get injured. And I need, if the Browns are going to go get a quarterback, they cannot get somebody that basically amounts to being a backup that you're trying to dress up as a starter. The only guy I can sort of make a pitch for in that scenario is like Jacoby Brissett, because he's played a good string of games for Arizona. You could sort of talk yourself into that. But even then, I still think they have to do better than that. I think they have to get a credible, real starting quarterback. That's why I pointed to guys like Geno Smith. And even that gets a lot of people are like, ooh, I don't want Geno Smith. He's a credible starting quarterback, even if you don't think he's necessarily the answer. Malik Willis is going to be an interesting conversation. Where does he want to go when he's a free agent? There's going to be some other guys out there that are going to be of interest. But Teddy Bridgewater does nothing for me, and I don't think I would hope he doesn't do anything for the Browns at this point. He's just a backup that can occasionally step in and start. You need somebody you've got to be able to sit there and actually, sit here and go, this guy, imagine this guy starting 17 games next year. How does that fit for you? Marcus Mariota does not pass that test for me.
Right. Let's get to a question from Julian Christopher. He says, would you keep Njoku for next year? And I think that sort of depends on what he wants, what the player wants.
Well, look, I would. Obviously, everything depends on what he wants. Inline tight ends are way more valuable than people think they are. And if you don't believe me, watch Blake Whiteheart in this game today. He had a rough day at certain points. Harold Fannin's fantastic. They need another guy to sort of balance him out because he can't get up there with his hand on the dirt all that often and do the dirty work. David Njoku can. He can get off the line and do stuff as a receiver. And if they have a better line, it frees him up to do more of those things as a receiver, which I think got lost this season. Where's his health? I don't know. But even if I could only keep him for one more year and draft somebody to develop, I would prefer to do that. Again, I'm big on tight ends in general. Again, if you like Kevin Stefanski and you're sitting there going, man, I like how all these teams are doing 13 personnel. Well, the Browns use 13 personnel quite a bit. And he likes tight ends anyway. So that's one more reason to sort of do that. But I don't like the idea of letting David Njoku walk and then just drafting somebody and hoping for the best. You're going to have to get somebody in there. If it's not Njoku, you're going to have to sign another free agent. Everything Njoku has talked about says he wants to stay here. Now, does that change if Kevin Stefanski's gone? It might. He does have a good relationship with Andrew Berry, or at least he has. So he may still be willing to stay and still want to stay. But he's made it pretty clear he doesn't want to move if he doesn't have to.
Right. Let's go to another question. AutoWorks Motorsports, who I believe used to call himself world's fastest fat man. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he says, "Hey Pete, Trey Lance. What do you think of Trey Lance, Pete?"
No, Trey Lance is what Shedeur Sanders is in terms of how I view him as a quarterback. Except I think Shedeur Sanders is more viable. Trey Lance is a guy you stick on the back of the bench and you sit there and develop, and you hope he can become something. At this point, he has not shown he can really do much yet. I'm certainly not giving him a starting job, and that's what you're asking me to do with these guys. I get from the standpoint you're probably saying, well, these guys compete, you pick the best guy. Okay, well, if they both stink, you're screwed. So
right.
Trey Lance is interesting. He's just always been this guy that has really interesting tools that just don't amount to much. And I have no interest in. I want somebody who's actually been good at football to sign and play for the Browns in that scenario.
That would be nice. That would be nice. ATR Short Film says, "Are you at all concerned about Denzel Ward staying healthy? He had at least it wasn't a concussion today. At least I thought I read that it was a neck injury. Is that right?"
Yes. You don't know. Maybe it's a pinched nerve or something. Am I concerned? Yeah, always, because he usually misses about a month a year. He's still very good at what he does. That's why I think the Browns always have to be cognizant of depth. That's why I'm hoping they are able to re-sign Martin Emerson in a deal that makes sense for both sides, and that Martin Emerson's trying to get back healthy and be back to being the player he was in 2023. And he can do that while being a backup for the Browns and giving the Browns some depth. So if Ward were to go down, they have a very credible corner they can insert in the lineup across from Tyson Campbell. And then there's a not so impossible future down the road where if Martin Emerson really does recover to full health and gets back to being a really good player, that he could eventually be the guy after Denzel Ward, because that contract, I believe, ends in 2027. I think theoretically next year could be the last year if you wanted it to be. But yeah, I mean, look, am I concerned about his health? Yes. I'm also sort of cognizant of, I don't know how many great seasons he has left in terms of what he can offer, just the nature of the position. And, losing any speed at that position, and especially at his size, is a huge problem. So I'm hoping he can play a long time and be very, very good. I'm certainly not running out to get rid of him or anything, but you always have to be cognizant of, do you have enough depth, particularly for the scheme the Browns play, particularly for the talent it demands to be able to play the man coverage they like to play. Losing Martin Emerson was a huge loss in terms of what it meant in terms of depth. The ability to go from, okay, well, Denzel Ward's down. Well, Greg Newsome could kick outside. Martin Emerson could play the other outside. Well, Tyson Campbell more than capable of being one of those outside corners, but you have lost that other element if you don't bring back Martin Emerson.
Right. And the question here from DeAndre Black is, do we draft somebody to try to develop between, with Ward, Emerson, and Tyson Campbell already on the roster?
I'd certainly consider it. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those positions you cannot have enough guys, and particularly the way the Browns play, you cannot have enough guys. So I'm always going to be out there looking at corners and guys that make sense for a man coverage scheme, because if the Browns consider the fact that when the Browns drafted Martin Emerson, we were all sitting here thinking, oh man, the Browns are set. Denzel Ward and Martin and Greg Newsome for a decade. At that point, it was like, this is the group. These are the guys. This is the new Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield tandem. They bring in Martin Emerson because the value was too good, and he completely upset the apple cart, and it sort of changed how the defense could go. So, I mean, the value's there. You take it. It's just an incredibly useful position. I have messed around with different possibilities in that component. I'm also I keep floating around with the idea of getting a much bigger nickel to sort of balance out what Martin Emerson does. But we'll see. There's a guy I will, when we get in a couple weeks or so, I've already written about a little bit that I will preview in terms of somebody that I think could fit that bill that would make sense for the Browns. But I'm always looking for corners that make sense for this team. And look, like, They don't have to be premium picks. Miles Harden was a
Mhm.
7th round pick. I think he's certainly outplayed that value, even if you aren't necessarily convinced he's the greatest nickel corner in the world. He certainly stabilized it compared to what they were rolling with at the start of the season.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. All right. Well, thank you, Pete, for your thoughts tonight as we talk about the Browns' 20-18 victory over the Cincinnati Bengals, and more importantly, what things look like moving forward. We're going to be continuing this discussion on the OBR 24/7 at theobr.com. So please visit us there. And in addition, Pete and I will be back tomorrow night with Lane Atkins in tow for a show called Gang of Three that starts at 7:15 on Monday night. We hope you join us. We're going to talk about the developments of the last 24 hours on that show and hear a little bit what Lane is thinking at this point in time as well. So for Pete Smith, I'm Barry McBride. Thank you for watching the OBR postgame. We'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.